Hello, and welcome back to Color Cues, a new series from Homepage News and the Inspired Home Show. I'm Tom Mirabile, the president of Springboard Futures and consumer trend forecaster for the IHA. We created Color Cues to bring you actionable updates and relevant inspiration on evolving color trends in the home and housewares marketplace. We know the best way to do that is to speak to the world's leading color forecasters and influencers. And so today, I am more than pleased to be speaking with Michelle Lamb, founder and editorial director of The Trend Curve. Michelle, thanks so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Hi, Tom.
Michelle, you have a remarkable history in trend reporting and, more importantly, in accurate trend forecasting. It's not something a lot of people can say through all the different things that we've been through. I've seen you I think the first time I saw you was, I don't even want to count the years, but it was a long time ago. I've seen you speak at every major market. I've seen you speak quoted by pretty much every major industry publication. You've worked with the biggest accounts that there are. And so congratulations on maintaining relevance and accuracy through all of that. A lot of times holiday decor it seems tethered to a very traditional sensibility. But I think one of the things that you brought to the fore is a sort of twist on tradition. So is there a particular twist on tradition that you are recommending for palettes?
The mindset of consumers is now changing. We were so fragile in 2020 and even the beginning of 2021, but now we've seen a shift from fragility to impatience. So we're all ready to gather and even to travel, if that's what's required, just to be together. And so we have that. And we also have some consumers, some people who are saying all these things that I've been mired in over the years, I really didn't like them that much. And life is too short to just do what you've always done. And so those people are anxious to move on to other possibilities and perhaps create new traditions in order to do it. So some people could act on that, but because of COVID, weather, staffing this year, others were not, whichever way your intuition took you. But I think the headline here is that we went from fragility to impatience in just under 2 years. And our fragility defined a moment, and now impatience, I think, will be defining the future. So I think we will see that definitely in 2022. But in terms of what new kinds of looks we'll be seeing, I think we'll see even a greater emphasis on everyday decor, the influence of everyday decor being brought into the holidays. So, for example, if brown is important in everyday decor, and it is increasingly important, whether the shade is beige or milk chocolate, not all the way to dark chocolate yet, if that's what's going on, then we will absolutely see that in Christmas palettes.
And that's with an eye towards extending the sort of appropriateness of seasonal decor in the home, or is it just that seasonal is going to follow the same trends? I mean, or it's both.
Follow safe trends, did you say?
Follow the same trends. Follow the same trends.
It's the same trends. There's a little bit of lag time for holiday. It's about a year. And the reason for that is we want the palette and the decor and the style to be established in people's homes before we can start bringing in Christmas. So it's the product development time and then the comfort level within the home.
So there's just two questions rolling around in my head right now. First, before we move on from this, are there any other emotional touch points that retailers should be aware of? So you've mentioned impatience, and you've mentioned a sense of, being, it's an emotional time. So are there any particular emotional touch points that retailers should be aware of, whether they're merchandising to it or whether they're merchandising around those touch points? What are the key consumer emotions that retailers are going to need to be aware of? Although nothing seems predictable right now, right?
Nothing seems predictable, and yet it's our job to predict. So what can we say about that? I think we would say that just as everyday styles and palettes are moving into the holidays, we're seeing some everyday topics moving into the holidays. Case in point, diversity and inclusion.
Yeah.
We're starting to see that, and this is something that is absolutely on the emotional radar. of people who are out there shopping for the holidays. So they're looking for things that are not just the same old predictable Santa Claus, but maybe a Santa Claus that speaks to different cultures or different motifs that are cultural touch points for some numbers of consumers. So they're looking for that. They're also, that especially since the pandemic began, consumers are very interested in sustainability. This is another reason for brown actually to be as prominent as it is and will be in future palettes. So we're looking for things that speak to natural materials and natural colors and those kinds of things to be brought in. So if retailers are looking for where's the emotion of all of this going, it has to be bigger than I feel anxiety, or I feel fragility, or I feel impatience. It also has to be, I feel a part of society in this way. And this is how society is evolving. And therefore, I want to express that in some way. It may not be completely overt, but it will be expressed in some way.
That's terrific. No, that makes absolute perfect sense. Pardon me. Let me ask you one other thing about the sense of impatience that you brought up. So this year and last year, we saw seasonal started earlier. I think in 2019, it was because, as you had pointed out at that time, we just needed a Christmas, like we needed it to start earlier because we just needed something enjoyable. And then this year, maybe it was supply chain issues. But let me ask you, do you think that seasonal, whether it's Halloween or whether it's Christmas or anything else, do you anticipate it starting earlier, continuing on this, I think the Wall Street Journal quoted it as starting 2 weeks earlier in terms of retail demand this year than it did last year. Do you anticipate that happening again next year? Is that something that's going to be echoed?
Yeah, I absolutely do. And you can look at supply chain as an issue. You can look at all sorts of really concrete things. But I think there's one other thing that goes back to the idea of impatience and optimism and enjoyment. We want things to enjoy. So many people were flummoxed this Christmas. We thought this would be the one, we'd be able to get out there and do everything that we wanted to do. And it didn't really happen that way. So we're saying, oh, all right, well, one more year of stories that we'll tell 5 years from now or 10 years from now. But if you want to enjoy yourself, and holidays really are an excuse for enjoying yourself, aren't they?
Yeah.
Why
absolutely.
not start it? Why not start early? Why not start 2 weeks early? And maybe it'll be 2 weeks earlier than it was in 2021.
It's interesting. Like seasonal has become this, it's always been sort of a safe zone, an emotional safe zone, an emotional sort of fountain for just visiting those happy moments. And it's great to see that, that continuing.
I love that idea. And I love the idea of course, here now, from my days at Target, I'm doing product development in my brain again. So I'm thinking maybe there'll be one thing from each holiday, and maybe these are new collections and collectibles. And now we need stands to display them and something else to come. But I love the idea of having a little bowl, a clear glass bowl, and having one ornament or one piece from each one of the holidays of the year, a favorite like one that you connect with.
So I just love the idea. So let me ask you just another quick couple of questions. I wanted to ask you, is there a place that you look to right now for inspiration, seasonal or otherwise? I mean, we've talked about seasonal a lot, but the breadth of, it's just for time's sake, the breadth of your color expertise goes as far and wide as I can imagine. But when we talk about seasonal, are there, or non-seasonal, are there places that you go for inspiration? Is there a particular new resource of inspiration for you?
Well, before I answer that, I'd like to say that when I was new in the trend business, and this was too many decades ago to mention, but I didn't have experience. Obviously, I was a retail buyer. I had bought a number of different categories for Target. I'd been the merchandise and operations manager for Room and Board, which is a furniture and accessory store. But when it came to being the one to lead the trend charge, I wasn't quite as experienced. And Target had just started trend merchandising, so I was the first one in that job, and so what I did was I read and read and read. I read everything I could get my hands on, every periodical, every publication that I could see. And then I reached deep down inside of myself to say, if this is what's going on with people who are out in the market, if this is what consumers are thinking and feeling, how does that translate into product? How does that translate into color? And thinking back on the last 30 years of trade shows that I've gone to and using them.
You went and put a number on it.
Yeah, I did it. Yes. I went and did it to myself. But thinking back on how helpful that was to look at what was there and say, if this is now, what do I think comes next? That was really great. But during the pandemic, that's been largely taken away.
Yes.
Trade shows are canceled. They're postponed. They're smaller. They're virtual. They don't have the same look and feel. There's still something there. Gratefully, I know many people in the marketplace, so we can have conversations. But I just want to say that in the last 2 years, I have reached down into my heart and soul for projections for the future more than I have since I first started in the trend business.
Right.
And it's been great. And now that I've said that, I'm also going to say art fairs, which are typically outside, seeing what artisans are doing. That's really been inspirational.
But, I love what you said about reaching down into your heart and soul, because I think trend, it's never, I hate that phrase now more than ever, but there's no other way to say it. Truly, I think trend has been more emotionally anchored recently than it has at any point. It was always something that we took a great deal of pride in saying, this is objective. We're looking at the industry objectively. It is a curve. There is a almost a mathematical equation to it. This is happening here. This is happening here. When you connect the dots, this is the curve that you see. But I think recently there's been so much personality, so much individual emotional anchoring to trends by the consumer that really, I think what you've done has been an organic way to really keep you being as accurate as you've always been. So fill in the blank. In the current inter-pandemic environment, consumers are looking to color for a sense of
optimism, protection, serenity.
Okay.
Because one size doesn't fit all. I am so sorry, but one size doesn't fit all. And it never has for trend. And that's why when you start to think about trend, it's not just one thing. No matter how important farmhouse was, no matter how big mid-century modern was during their era in the realm of trend, they weren't the only show out there.
So I'm going to ask you to do something, and last thing before we go into the palette that I asked you for, but objectivity has always been the hallmark of a good trend forecaster. And no, I'm going to ask you, because I told you I was going to ask you this, but is there a single color? I want you to put objectivity aside, okay? I want you to put aside what is put you at the top of your craft for the last 30 years and tell me, is there a single color that creates an emotional response in you? You, Michelle.
The answer is no.
Wow.
Every color creates an emotional response.
Oh,
and the reason
better.
This gets into the woo-woo part of stuff that I don't talk about, but nonetheless believe. Color is vibration. I mean, it vibrates at a certain frequency. We know that. We can prove that. And our bodies vibrate. And so it's a matter of emotion and how that changes your vibration from day to day, and how you vibrate with colors that are vibrating at you. Even thought is vibration. All of it's vibration. So, which color? The answer for me is yes.
That's brilliant. That's the best answer I've gotten in this series for that question, because everybody's so proud of their objectivity, and I like the fact that it's like, I just love
Well,
you.
the
Um,
objectivity matters, and I will say
of
that
course,
when I was new in trend, it took me a while to put my personal preferences aside. And
yes,
now, if you were to say to me something as simple as, "What's your favorite color?" I'm not sure I could tell you because I've
yeah,
spent so long not acknowledging anything other than what's saleable. What's
right,
saleable today? What's saleable in a year? Well, when I first started in trend, they wanted your 5 year forecast and stretch to 7. And now things are much closer in.
yeah,
And it's your 1 year forecast stretch to 2, really reach for 3. And I feel like, I feel like it's a party. I feel like I'd have to be an idiot to fail at 3 years because it was the 7 that was so hard. 3 was always
right.
easy.
It's a different world though.
It's
But
a different
but
world.
I love the response, because it's, I mean, you're more on style and I'm more on consumer, but we hone our skills on the ability to objectify everything. But there,
Exactly.
but it's true. I mean, at the end of the day, there still is a resonance. Any trend has a resonance, a vibration to it, whether it's color, whether it's consumers, and what they're doing and how they're living. And if you can't relate to it in some way, it's just math, which has never been enough for me. So
Agreed.
okay,
And
so I
and furthermore, Tom, if it doesn't sell, it doesn't matter.
that's
So
true.
who cares what your
That's true.
preference is? It
Right.
really, it has to sell. And in the
It has
work
to.
that you do and the work that I do, this is all in support of assortment development. Every bit of it. What's the
Absolutely.
right thing to have in my line? What should be in my store in this particular time frame? When do I get into it and when do I get out? That's what trend is in my estimation. It's really about support of assortment development and it's about mitigating risk. Those two things. I loved
Absolutely.
what you said about there's almost a mathematical formula because there is a mathematical formula.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But a part of all of that is being able to say, okay, what are the things that, what makes something sell? What are those key points, that drive the sale? And we have to acknowledge that emotion is a part of that. You can't, so while it's, you know, we have to look at consumers and be able to understand the emotional drivers behind the physical action. They're always there, and maybe more so now than they were before. But trend at its best is absolutely quantifiable, and anybody who
Mm-hmm.
says that it's not quantifiable, that's a weak position. So we agree on that. We're working on a project with that in the future, you and I. So I'm excited about that. I'm going to leave your contacts up here for right now, and say thank you, Michelle. It's always just wonderful speaking to you. You're always inspirational. Thank you for joining us here at Color Cues. If any of you wish to reach Color Cues, you can reach us at theinspiredhome.com. Thank you for joining us. Please come back and see us at our next episode. And again, Michelle, thank you so much. It was great
I had a
talking.
great time. Thanks for having me, Tom.
My pleasure.